Welcome to the third video on writing essays for Mr. Taylor's ESAT history class. So in this video, by this time, we have already written our introduction, we've done our planning for introduction, and we've written our body paragraphs. So we've, in our introduction, given some historical background, what happened before the Reformation. We have given our thesis statement. What we're trying to prove is that the Reformation caused the Catholic Church to lose control over politics and religion. And we've written our body paragraphs that have proven that using specific evidence and analysis. But now we need to write a conclusion, which is for many people something that's very difficult. And part of the problem is it's been terrible teaching, in my opinion, by teachers and English teachers on how to write a conclusion. So I'm going to give you my format of a conclusion, because conclusions are very important. The last thing a reader sees before they grade an essay. So you want to impress them. So bad conclusions, as I said, often will just simply repeat the key information from the body paragraphs. You know, in conclusion, blah, 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 this is what I said, I told you about this, and I told you about that, and here's this, and here's that. Just repeating the things that have already been said. That is boring, and it's not effective. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't have a job, okay? If that's what you feel like you need to do in your conclusion, what you really need to do is go back into your body paragraphs and make your body paragraphs better, because it should be memorable in your body paragraphs. So instead, the only thing that should be repeated is the thesis statement. Okay, so let's talk about that. What should be in a body paragraph? Well, first, you need to restate that thesis statement. And don't just write it in the same words, but change it up a little bit. Okay, and by change it up, don't change up the content of it, but just the wording of it. Okay, now, what is going to separate your conclusions through this method from others is this idea of significance. So what you want to do is you want to give the topic sentence some significance. In other words, tell why it matters. And you can do that several different ways. I'm going to give you 4 different ways that you can do that. Just pick one. Don't do all 4 of them. Just pick one and spend a little bit of time explaining what you mean. So one of those is, how has it changed life for us today? So we're looking at life in 2014. We're looking at an event from 1517, the 1500s. So how exactly did that event back then change our life today? Okay, so you could talk about how the reform that's happened in the Catholic Church. You could talk about how the Protestant religion now has many denominations and is a leading power of the religious view of the United States and shaping our policy within our country. Okay. You could talk about future events in history and how did it impact those. For instance, perhaps you pick out the French Revolution, right? And you might say, well, the Reformation would eventually lead to an event like the French Revolution because people realized that they could question authority and they did not have to just accept what they were being told and by those in positions of power. Okay, what lessons did we learn about society? Maybe we learned something about how people can have the power to control their own understanding of the world, that we do not need to rely on a church or an informational body to give us information and then just trust them, but that sometimes we need to go right to the source and find things out for ourselves. Okay, is it something that has occurred recently? Think about things going on in the world, current events. That's why it's really important to understand current events and what's going on right now, because pretty much everything that's happening now is in some way linked to something that's happened in the past. So I know there's a lot of revolutionary acts going on right now. For instance, in the Middle East, you have events going on in Syria where you have a king who's trying to exert his will and people who don't trust him anymore. You could then make that comparison to the Reformation, where you had the Catholic Church who had all the power, and people began to lose trust in the power through corruption, through people standing up against it. And you could say that's happening in Syria at the moment as well. Okay. So here's my example. I kind of go with one of those. So in the blue, I restate the thesis. The Reformation was a turning point in European history as the Catholic Church began to see its tight grip on European politics and religion slip away. Okay, and then I go into my significance. Why does this matter? What did this lead to? What is the impact in history? So I say, the lesson in the Reformation is that no one person or group can ever maintain absolute power over the people for a long time without a resistance movement standing up against it. The Reformation of the 16th century CE became just a stepping stone to political revolutions in France, England, and America as the general population began to realize that authority could successfully be challenged and replaced as the Protestant churches had done with the Catholic Church. Okay, so I'm showing just a very simple way of saying it is going to lead to these future events. Okay, and what I've done is, if you look at the essay as a whole, in the introduction, you have starting off with the historical context. In other words, what's happening at that time. So it's kind of like, here's what's happening going up to this essay. You have the essay. Here's what I want to say. Here's my information, and the significance. Here's what it leads to in the future. So I think it's almost like, here's the past. The present is what the essay is about, and then the future is the significance. It gives it kind of a continuum of time, and it shows that you understand periodization. In other words, you understand what happened before, what's happening now, and what happens in the future. Okay? So, as you go on writing your conclusions, try to use different methods, different ones of those questions. What lessons did we learn? How's it impacting us today? What's it like today? And how did it impact other events from history? If you can become good at writing conclusions, what's going to happen is you're going to have the reader think more favorably of your essay and realize that you are a student of history, and perhaps be a little bit more lenient in the grading because they understand that you do understand what's going on in history. All right, so go ahead, give it a shot, write your conclusion, and if you have any questions, watch the video again or contact Mr. Taylor. All right, bye.